I am here with our sync team. Pat Hendricks, Tony East from our sync team. How you doing? Good?
Great. The show's been great.
Pat?
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun.
So you had a session today. What did you guys talk about? Kind of high level, what were the big things? What, if I was an audience member, is going to most excite me about hearing what you guys are going to dig into today?
Well, first we started to talk about how you can deploy OneDrive Sync using automatic account configuration and placeholders, and it makes for like a 30-second machine setup, and it's fantastic.
So the first time a user logs in, no wizard, no nothing, all they do is they turn it on and boop.
Correct. With the right settings, we'll pick up the account right from Windows for an Azure domain joined machine or a normal domain joined machine, and we'll sign right in and get sync set up. User doesn't even have to do anything.
Right, now that's coming in preview this week?
That's exactly right. And so we just announced that this is available for public preview now.
Right.
And so in addition to that, we've rolled out some new changes with our ADM packages to streamline deployments as well.
How easy is it going to be for someone to set this up? Because we did the demo yesterday where we're showing, here it is using autopilot, which makes it so much easier to do. It brings UEV into that, or Azure, and then Exchange Online, which brings all the email down for the user, and then Files on Demand with ADOL, bringing in all their files that are critical to them. That's going to be the first question. How difficult is this going to be for me to set up? Either one of you.
And so for Files on Demand, all you need to do is be part of Windows Insiders, and you'll have Files on Demand be ready to go.
Or October 17th when we release it,
That's
right?
exactly right. And so for ADM updates, those are actually available now as part of both our preview audiences as well as production audiences as well. And so we have online documentation on how you can actually opt in to ADOL, which will enable automatic account configuration. And so that'll just be a simple registry key that you want to deploy to your organizations or anyone testing.
Right.
And then on top of that, the ADM packages are deployable via group policy.
Okay.
Yeah, so to get that all set up, it's only one or two settings in the registry, so it's super simple. The documentation covers it.
Great.
You're basically telling OneDrive to do the automatic configuration since it doesn't have an account set up yet, and you're just kind of making sure that you've set some of those other settings so that we can do that job.
Awesome.
But once the administrator has set that, the next time OneDrive runs, we're all set up.
Okay. Get a lot of questions. You sit in a lot of customer meetings. Thank you, both of you, so much for sitting in many customer meetings. What are some of the big things that we have heard from customers that have made them unhappy or really kind of slowed them down that we've solved, that we're excited to come out this week and talk about and say, hey, this was an issue, it's not anymore, we feel good about where things at. Let's obviously start with the big one, Groove. And now NGSC, which we released back in January, which folks are loving, so let's do that and then let's move to more specific this week.
Yeah, so clearly it's been a long journey moving off of the old version of OneDrive for Business, the old Groove client, onto the new Sync. So that's been a really rewarding journey. We started with OneDrive, took on Team Site Sync and shared content. And so now the admins and all of our customers can now sync reliably all of the Office 365 content that they want. So what we're hearing there is that everyone loves it, they want to deploy, and the big thing that they're really excited about right now is the automatic account configuration.
Yeah.
That's not tied to RS3. That's going to work down level for them, and it's going to...
And that's a really good point if you're doing Windows 7 or any of
right.
those.
And just getting your users signed in is half the battle, and once they do that, and if they redirect my documents, the documents, desktop, and pictures, it just makes for an amazing experience for the users.
And Team Site Sync was huge too. That was a big thing for folks. What did you hear when you started getting on calls and started talking about that before we released it? What was the reaction from customers?
Yeah, right. Team Site Sync was really what was the turning point for a lot of customers in their deployments. Not only is syncing your personal OneDrive for Business so important for customers, but syncing and bringing that collaborative content down as well was really what started to enable the deployments of the client.
Right.
And now, as Tony was mentioning, part of this is making the transition from Groove onto OneDrive that much easier. And with that, with things like automatic account configuration, users can automatically be signed into OneDrive, and OneDrive will automatically take over libraries that were previously syncing with Groove, just to make that transition completely seamless for your end user.
So what happens when a user now logs on, because some have older images that still have Groove? How does that process work? Because I know that when they run click to run and things like that, it doesn't take over. Kind of walk us through that.
Sure, we're doing a couple things there. One, we just take over all the sync workloads we can, and we turn off, we basically don't run Groove anymore.
Right.
One of the things we're working on with the Office team in the click-to-run SKU is we'll be able to detect if Groove is still handling any sync workloads, and if it's not, we'll go ahead and uninstall it as part of the next upgrade cycle for click-to-run. So it'll just sort of disappear off the machine. Of course, if you still need Groove for other reasons, there's easy manifest that you can set to make sure that we don't do that. But for the most general cases, most users and most enterprises will want to have that Groove just disappear. So we're doing all the work to make sure that that goes away, and some of the confusion around two things in the start menu and extra clouds, that just starts to fade into the distance without really anybody doing anything.
So is there a reason if somebody does not have SharePoint on-premise still for them to still have Groove?
No, with the release of IRM Sync that will go into preview now, basically all of the different sync workloads will be supported by the
Talk a little bit more about that. The IRM Sync libraries is something we announced in our session, but digging a little bit deeper on what that means to folks.
Yeah, IRM Sync has always been a bit of a challenge for the Sync client because
Let's go even higher. What is IRM DRM content?
That's a great place to start.
Because people go, is that like what was EDP that became WIP, that became MIP and keeps changing names? Yeah, let's...
Oh man, I'm so in the thick of things, I forget that people don't know sometimes.
Well, we change it too often. Luckily, IRM, DRM has stayed the same, so yeah.
So starting at the top, so IRM is information rights management content. Right. And so on the back end, what's actually happening here is that this content is encrypted when a user tries to download it, and it actually involves correct authentication in order to gain access to that content. And so Office files support rights managed content really well. But that makes Sync really difficult because Sync actually has to deal with downloading encrypted content and actually keeping in sync encrypted content. And so in this last year, we've actually done a lot of work with the Office and the RMS teams, the rights management teams, to make sure that we as the Sync client can correctly decrypt that content and keep it in sync. So it's been a fun technical problem to tackle.
Is it because of the encrypted headers and footers and all that sort of stuff and what's on the drive? Why is it so tough?
So it's encrypted in flight. So basically on egress, it's encrypted. When we write it to disk, we need to make sure what we got over the network and wrote to disk matches what's in the service.
Right.
And so we do a hash. And if you hash an encrypted thing and you hash the thing that's stored in the clear on the service, it's a different thing. So we had to work out, Pat talked about being able to decrypt it. We decrypt it to hash it, we store it encrypted. It's just so that we know that sync is reliable, and we actually have transmitted the file that was on the service and made it all the way to the disk.
Right.
If we don't check, we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as Tony mentioned, one of the hardest parts about it is that the files are encrypted in flight, so that means that we don't have a consistent encrypted file hash that we can go back and reference.
Right.
And so that means that the Sync client needs to be dynamic in how it checks for the download correctness and sync correctness and consistently encrypt and decrypt the file.
And it's got to be fast to an end user.
It has to be fast. It has to support large files.
And it's encrypted for each user independently based on their key.
Right.
Right, so it's not like what you have on your disk is the same as what I have on my disk, so I can't store the encrypted hash simply because now I have to store it for every user who's syncing that library. So it just gets to be very, very complicated. And I think
but you solved it.
Our engineers definitely came up with an elegant solution that lets us be able to take a library that's not IRM enabled, flip a switch and basically go through and encrypt all that content. And if they decide that that's too much protection and too many yellow bars in Office, they can flip that back off and we'll go and decrypt and sync down the normal version.
So how do you, when you guys sit in a room and go, and we talk with Omar and Jason and Jeff, and they're like, this is how we kind of prioritize and look. When you go, that's got to be a big nut that we've got to solve because we have a lot of customers. How do you even approach that? When you guys sit in the room and you go, this is our big thing, and then I want to ask you for next year, at Ignite, what's going to be that next big thing? But let's start with this one. How do you guys approach that? When you sit as a team, how do you even go, we want to do this? Because this is not like there's just a standard procedure for doing that.
Well, you manage a lot of the backlog, so
give us the behind-the-scenes DVD view on how you do that.
Honestly, at the end of the day, it's a big, long list, and it is informed by real customer stories, customer insights, where we can actually be adding value and moving the needles the most.
User voice.
User voice is
we love
great.
User voice.
We love user voice, absolutely. And so it's backed by what are the features that are most impactful for the users, what will unblock deployments, what will make customers the most productive. And so a lot of that is backed by our own data, a lot of it is backed by things like user voice and direct customer conversations. And so we want to make sure our community feels included in how how we build our roadmaps.
And as I looked at it, as one of the deciders, as I like to think, I don't really, but
It's your title
it
on your
was,
business card.
but it
Tony
was,
East Decider.
but it was the last sync workload on Office 365 that we still needed Groove for.
Yes.
And so for me to be able to finish the journey in Office 365 of being able to really say you don't need Groove anymore for anything.
Right.
Which, by the way, that's that's my job, right?
Right. It'll also be the title of your autobiography.
It will be. It will be. So that really tipped the scales on this one for sure as a super critical feature to solve. And even when the engineers came back and said, "Wow, this is really hard," and all the, so that's the little bit of the dance to do. And you say, "Listen, if we do this, then we can."
Right.
Remove Groove from click to run. We can do. We can start to make this progress that we've been trying to make for 3.5 years, and sort of put a ending chapter on that part of the journey.
That's great. What else is a big thing this week that you're going to be landing that you think customers are going to be really excited about?
Like files on demand, everybody talked about it. The demos that I do get a little bit down deeper into some of the plumbing of files on demand.
Yeah.
And
you and I and Michael Niehaus, we've been having some great chats. He's been involved. It's been a great cross-org collaboration on that.
I absolutely love the Azure Autopilot stuff. It's going to mean so much for our small and medium business customers.
Absolutely.
Be able to just get a laptop and go. But what a lot of people don't know is the way the files on demand really works under the covers is we are talking to the file system. We're deeply integrated. We're writing that metadata into the NTFS file table.
Right.
Right. Like when we say 0 bytes on disk, we mean 0 bytes on disk. And we've
including thumbnails, which was such a huge
thumbnails
issue.
Go into ThumbDB, and we're generating them on the cloud, so it's not using battery and network to do that stuff, right? So, and they've had to modify the commands like dir, because they had to put the parentheses around the files that are not in the cloud. That's a that's a change.
Yeah.
Also, adding attributes like the read only and all those attributes. We have 2 new attributes for files on demand, and you can actually hydrate and dehydrate files with a command line. And so when I show that to some of them, and I say, hey, listen, you can take your HR documents and you can pin them for your users and say, you know what, you can't ever tell me you couldn't sync the HR documents because I know they're pinned because I pinned them.
Yeah.
Or you can clean up a user's machine by unpinning it, just like dehydrating everything. And when they see the power of this and how deeply it's integrated with the file system, we are file open.
Right. And that makes a huge difference when we look at our competitors where they have similar products that really sit on top. And we were saying earlier with Jason and Omar and Jeff that you're not going to get a thumbnail. You can't go into Cortana and search and say, show me every document that has this text. And now with some of our new photo features, even show me photos that have that. We're digging in at a whole different level because of that deep integration. But that opens up a lot of opportunities for what we can do. So I think as you look forward with these technologies, what do both of you see as ways where we can start to kind of look at files on demand and move forward and do some cool new things in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a couple aspects here. I think first and foremost, one of the key customer scenarios that just come into play in terms of a normal deployment is customers who are living in environments with mapped network shares. And so hands down, I feel like even just in the customer conversations this week, it's the top seeder scenario to say, hey, I have a bunch of content and network shares that I want to get to the cloud.
Right.
How do I have OneDrive and SharePoint with me everywhere I go, but still have the benefit of a mapped network drive, which is it scales to large and small factor devices like PCs and Macs. And so with files on demand, we can actually bring that same benefit to our customers. And that's really exciting because that just completely unblocks deployment and gives them a very seamless transition from an environment that they were already very familiar with. And I think Tony will talk a little bit too about how this potentially opens the door for things like VDI as well.
Okay. I'm going to go to hardball. Well, no, go ahead.
So I would add, if you think about a setting that would leave all files in the cloud all the time, right? So imagine that you could tie this into some security features. We could make all of your files disappear if you're in the wrong place.
Right.
And then rehydrate them really quickly. Because we can sort of build up and tear down that namespace really quickly, we can do some really powerful things, and we can assure, some folks will be more comfortable knowing that the information isn't actually on the drive until the user's using it, and then sort of gone through all those other security checks. So anyway,
and we talked today that this is the potential start for a VDI solution.
Potential start. Yep, and again, the ability to build up and tear down a namespace quickly. You can imagine being able to give administrative control over which SharePoint libraries are pre-mapped to,
Absolutely, yeah.
or we'll just take your favorites. If you star it, you can see it in the shell. And
can we tap into Graph to bring
yes,
that intelligence
absolutely. We'll be able to take all that intelligence in. We're also doing something that our competitors aren't doing, and that's there's a bit in the Windows file system that talks about when that file was last accessed, and so whether or not the file has been hydrated and dehydrated, we know if you've looked at that file. So we can start doing a feature where we can get rid of files you haven't looked in for a long time. We can start to just dehydrate automatically in the background, or let the admin set a threshold and say, listen, I only want 10 gigs on this machine, and then start dehydrating, in a smart, intelligent way. Your most, all your documents that are shared with you in some way, or like it's things you're working with.
It opens up great ideas for GPOs and admin console
Absolutely.
and things that we'll start to see in V2 and V3.
Absolutely.
Hardball question, bandwidth controls. A lot of customers not moving to Windows 10 yet. They like OneDrive, but they're concerned. I know we have some announcements to speak some things, so why don't we talk a little bit about what we're doing to help folks out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, in Windows 10 and onwards, files on demand is such a great solution, but that doesn't make us any less dedicated to Windows 7, 8, and then Windows 10 platforms that don't yet support files on demand.
And Mac.
And Mac as well. And so a couple of GPOs that we're introducing that are actually available now are a couple of things. So we've heard a lot of feedback that users and specifically admins would like the same type of explicit throttles for both upload as well as download. And download, I think, was hands down one of the biggest feature requests that we had. So we're really excited that we're now offering both upload and download throttles.
Cool.
And so in our GPOs, we have those available today, and you can use them.
But you want to be careful when you use them, because you can slow sync down,
Yes.
It's, like we covered in our talk.
We have a blog post coming out that you're working on the ADOL stuff and on so just kind of telling folks where to go and how it all comes together. So what are we going to talk about next year? I know we're still kind of like, yay, we got here, but if you take a look at kind of our roadmap, what is really important to you in the next year to accomplish?
Again, I think sort of building on what we've delivered with the Files on Demand platform. Okay. As I think about it, this is the first time we've ever been able to actually interpret user intent when it comes to file manipulation. So today, if a user presses delete at the very top of their OneDrive, Windows does some stuff, and we hear what's happening on the file system. We don't know what the user did. Now we know what the user did. We knew and we can start to think about saving them from doing things if they don't quite understand the concept of sync. We can sort of get in the middle of that and start to educate a little bit and make sure that the moves that they're doing that might be destructive, they meant to do, and help guide them. So we're just in by being kind of in the middle.
Do as I mean, not as I say.
And we can start to do is, really think about it from the user perspective. And so I think that's, and seeing all the deployments that are going to happen with the Creators Update and with Files on Demand, I'm just super excited to see that magic auto account config, and some of the things that we can do with that. We'll be doing the document redirection built into the sync client, so that we'll have just another GPO that we'll be able to let the admin set that, and OneDrive runs and just does all the move and does everything for
the reaction today in our session when we showed that, the short video of that going on. The IT pros were like, finally, awesome. Yeah. It's like the lay angels sung.
Right, and it sort of embodies the Microsoft 365, right? It gets your machine into the ideal state, as we call it, right? Where you're just set up and you almost can't miss the cloud. Like if you put it on your desktop, it's in the cloud. If you put it on documents, in the cloud. Pictures, in the cloud.
Absolutely.
So just makes it.
Pat, how about you? You and your team, what are you going to be focused on?
Oh man, so many things. And so we talked a lot about Windows, but also, in all of this, Mac is just as an important partner in all of this. And so bringing things like conditional access to Mac, Office integration, making sure OneDrive is included in Office SKUs are huge. And then I think back on the Windows side, just making sure that our deployments are as streamlined as possible, making sure that our policies are extensible to things like Intune as well for mobile device management. Just continuing the story there to really unblock and make those deployments more seamless.
Cool. If a customer's not using OneDrive today, I'll ask each of you for an answer. What would you say to them? Why should they use OneDrive?
OneDrive unlocks the power of the cloud for a lot of their users. What we've seen is when a user uses OneDrive on 2 endpoints, sync and mobile, say, it's like this magic moment where it's like an education on the cloud. They get it all of a sudden. And so having all of your stuff just go to the cloud means that they don't have to be convinced yet, right? But they can, and then when they are ready to have their aha moment, their stuff's already there for them, right? And so it's backed up, it's safe, it's like, it's if their machine goes away, you can get their stuff back, and for whatever, and then at some point they're going to discover the OneDrive mobile apps, and they're going to see their stuff, and they're going to share from there, and it's just this amazing moment. So, our sync is an amazingly reliable, fast product now, and there's just no reason to wait.
No, the one thing I learned as an IT pro, and that fits in with it, is no matter how cool we think something is, end users don't care how it works, they just want it to work. It needs to be transparent and visible. I do this and it's there.
Yes.
And that's such a critical thing. And
we're there, and we're there.
And we're there, and we want to make that even better and even more intuitive as we do that.
Absolutely.
Pat, how about for you?
Oh gosh, I think with OneDrive and SharePoint, it's just so many things, so many things.
But customer says, all right, so you're in an elevator, oh, you work on the OneDrive team. We're using file shares. Why should we use OneDrive?
Yeah, so I think OneDrive and SharePoint really enables maximum productivity with the protection of you lose your device, you lose your PC, your phone, your content is always there, and we back it by that promise of this is content that's accessible, that enables collaboration, and it doesn't distinguish between Office files versus non-Office files. It's really an inclusive and a diverse set.
Any device,
of tools.
anywhere.
Any device, anywhere.
Yeah. And the Office integration that I keep hearing people discovering that, and so the notion that when I open a file, even from my disk, that you're in a collaborative session, people are like, wait, that's in like the the Win32 clients, really? Wow! And so it's like that's what we do, and you start to see people discover that. So it's another, and more people are collaborating and creating, and it's just becoming a more and more regular part of everyone's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one last question is, we're seeing more iPads and Android devices and MacBooks in our demos as we're doing it, far more. We have really taken on that. We really want to have a ubiquitous experience, whether you're using the web client, because it's interesting, we're finding folks who are a little older, like myself, love the Win32 desk client. We've rolled out Teams. A lot of folks your age, you guys love Teams. I keep going, send me an email. There's so many different ways to work, and we sit in meetings and there's somebody with an iPad, somebody with a MacBook, myself with Windows. How do you guys sort of look at that as you look at, we really want to create that ubiquity and that equal experience, but sometimes it's harder to do. We control our own environment. We can't always control Apple's or Google's or this and that. So how do you approach that?
Boy, that's actually a really good question. And so when I think about it, it's really a couple of things. We want OneDrive and SharePoint to be the best it can be on these platforms. And so we very much balance how does it look across these platforms, making sure we have unified experiences, but still making sure that we're true to what is most appropriate and most valuable to how content is being used across those platforms. And so we're both, you're right, absolutely right that it's a balance, because when we have to ask ourselves, is sync actually always the right model for mobile?
Right.
Maybe, maybe not. And so what we get to do is we get to really be thoughtful about how do users use these platforms best? Like, how is mobile an advantageous tool for a customer? And how does that change how you access, your OneDrive and how you access files? And so we make sure that it's less about making sure we force a consistent experience across these different platforms, but making sure that we enhance our experience such that it's the best it can be with a diverse set of tool set.
The right experience for the right platform.
The right experience for the right platform.
Yeah, and that, like with Apple, for example, we released a standalone OneDrive client because the one in the store, while great, it wouldn't load at startup, it wouldn't be persistent in the Finder, and that was a critical experience, and people were not getting the value out of the product, and now, by integrating it into Mac Office, we're giving people that experience, which that is the right experience for that device.
That's right.
Yeah, and then we'll do deeper integration there, and we'll get to the point where we have the same collaboration experience when you're opening from your local drive on your Mac. We'll be doing that, in the coming months as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. I would just add, supplement what Pat said.
Yeah.
The sharing experience is a great example of how we took one experience and sort of brought it across all of the endpoints. And so once you learned it, you say, oh, I know how to use this, and oh, it's the same thing, and you just get that experience everywhere. And so there's platform-specific things, and then there's things that you want cohesion around and consistent experience.
Yeah, now we brought that share to Office.
Absolutely.
And the great thing is we brought it to Windows, then it was web, then it came to Windows, and now we're bringing it to Office. So yeah, once you learn how to share once, it should work the same way everywhere.
Exactly.
And now with mobile, our Android iOS experiences and what we're doing there. And again, last question. Revolution and evolution, as you take a look at features, as you take a look at what's going to happen over the next year, how do you balance a evolutionary feature, we have to have this because it's a compete feature or it's something folks are asking for, with something really revolutionary like a files on demand, like iMessage share, things like that. How do you balance those two when you sit in a meeting?
Well, obviously we saw the vision of the the revolution of files on demand. Right, and realized that the ability to see all of the data in your enterprise, terabytes and terabytes of data, without taking any space in your drive, that was just, it was too important to not do. And I think we're at the point, we've got a lot of stuff now that's foundational, and I think we'll be able to really go deep, and I think of it as going deeper and getting more depth to all the scenarios we're doing.
Yeah.
I think we have a good breadth now.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's some places that we'll just drill down and
it's
really,
going to be a little bit of both, actually.
Yeah. So we'll have a little bit of both.
Pat, revolution, evolution.
Oh boy, for me it's all about customer value. At the end of the day is what are the experiences that are going to unblock users, make users more productive, empower, again, it goes back to Satya's, empower every person, every organization in the world to do more. So at the end of the day, easy, customer value.
There's no better place to end them with a Satya quote.
There you go.
Awesome. Pat, Tony, thanks so much for joining me today. Have a great time at Ignite.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.